Welcome to the show where self-leadership is the foundation of all areas of your life. I'm Janessa Finley Ford, and I help emerging leaders sharpen decision making from a regulated state and develop the kind of calm, influential presence that can be felt when you enter a room. Through neuroscience, soul work, and practical structure, I teach ambitious women how to create calm without losing momentum. Because the most powerful leader in the room is rarely the loudest. So let's meet my partner.
And I'm SJ. I'm a results-driven leader who leads with conviction and strength, setting an unapologetic standard of excellence. I build high-trust communities where candor and accountability forge dependable leaders. And as a certified crystal healer and shamanic earth and energy medicine practitioner, I blend science, spirit, and strategy together to rewire energetic patterns for peace, potency, and purpose.
So exhausting leadership situations aren't the ones where you don't know what to do. You may have to sit with this and think about it for a little while because I used to really believe that is what drained my energy. But what is actually true is that the most exhausting leadership situations are the ones feel true at the same time. And so, for example, you may need to hold someone accountable and you also genuinely care about them and kind of would prefer not to. Or you need to move quickly, but you also know that rushing will create just more problems to clean up. You want your team to, yet you know that lowering the standard isn't the answer at all. And somewhere in that tension, your brain starts demanding a verdict between which one is right, which one wins, which side do you choose? And that's the basis for today's conversation because most leaders think their stress coming from the situation at hand when it's not. It's coming from your mind's demand for certainty, situations that require complexity. So this month, we're exploring the law of polarity, and nowhere is it more relevant than in leadership because leadership rarely lives in this either or paradigm. Leadership lives in both and logic. And yet, the unseen force shaping so many of our decisions is our brains, which is wired to simplify because it loves efficiency. And it also feels like it's going to conserve more energy if it can just make a black and white decision and move on rather than living in the gray. So your brain is constantly or wrong, success, failure, strong, weak, safe or dangerous. It really wants that nice, tidy box. It wants an answer. It wants relief. It wants ease. But leadership doesn't reward the fastest answer. It rewards the capacity to stay present long enough to discover the wisest answer. And this is where the unseen becomes seen. The unseen is your body, your mind's discomfort with the uncertainty. It's the brain's craving for resolution, the internal pressure to eliminate tension as quickly as possible. And what you see then is rushed decisions, micromanagement, over-explaining, defensiveness, avoiding the difficult conversations, even trying to be liked instead of respected, protect people from discomfort instead of leading them through it. What looks like a communication problem is often a capacity problem. And what looks like a leadership issue is often an inability to hold tension without reacting. And holding tension is something that we talk quite a little about in the Stronger Together community. Exceptional leaders, they don't eliminate this polarity. They learn to stay present inside of it so that they can hold that tension. They can hold accountability and be compassionate. They can be confident with humility. They're going to get the results and maintain the well-being of themselves and their staff. The effectiveness, the collaboration all works together. And it's not because they have all the answers, it's really because they've developed the capacity to resist the brain's demand for certainty long enough for that wisdom to drop in. So today we're going to explore one of the most overlooked leadership there is, which is the ability to move beyond this black and white thinking, be able to regulate yourself with while in the uncertainty and discover the power that exists between the opposites when both are true. So let's open our eyes. I am going to start us off today with a funny story. Some ways, but we're going for it anyway. So, my regular routine this time of year is to ride my motorcycle to work. And that requires my lunch, everything that I need. It's in a pack. I don't have bags on my bike. So I wear a pack on my back. And I have been on this kick of drinking warm chicken broth in the morning, just part of my breakfast. And also, I've kicked the coffee habit. So I love the substitute of still having that warm beverage. And I also take filtered water in my bag. So these are kind of the general contents within my bag on a regular day. And I was really brave on this morning and decided to wear white pants, which on a motorcycle with road grime and, the grease on the bike and everything. I've had a little practice. I feel pretty confident in that situation as long as there isn't rain in the forecast, because that would be a disaster. But I was not prepared for what happened. So as I'm walking into work and I've had this pack on my back solid like 20 minutes throughout my commute, there was the moment of clarity that my brain registered there's something that is damp on my back, like real low back. And like, this is no good. This is absolutely no good. I think the only thing this could possibly be is chicken broth. And so I take my bag off. I open my bag. Yep, sure enough. The container that I have the chicken broth in, which is a thermos, the lid, even though it's sealed, like it's just dripping. It's leaking, which thank goodness it had been a slow leak. But then I realized I am wearing chicken broth on white pants. So I decided to do what any strong leader would do, and I marched myself to the single occupancy bathroom as I derobe my pants to wash them by hand in the sink. And I swear to you, the moment that you have the realization that what in the world has my life come to, that I am standing pantless in a bathroom at work, washing my pants by hand and using the hand because for sure white is see-through when it's wet. Like this is not something that you can march on through your day with until it air dries. And I decided the only thing I can about this situation is just laugh about it and then share it with other people so they could laugh too. I was telling other fellow coworkers this happened because I was in the middle of a conversation actually with someone when I had that realization that my back, my pants, I'm wet. This is not right. I was talking with a coworker and was telling me a story about her boyfriend's motorcycle. So I went to catch up with her and I'm like, well, you should be laughing hysterically at me. And the other lady was like, oh my gosh, I spilled on my pants like a week ago and was looking for something to do to get myself through the day and not be incredibly embarrassed. And I never thought about the single occupancy bathroom. So not only did I get them to laugh, I also shared the wealth of knowledge of how you cleanse yourself when needed at work in the office. So today we're moving in about leadership and the law of polarity. I'm just going to hand it off to SJ to get us started.
I want to talk about this topic through the lens of how sometimes leaders fall into the trap of promoting loyalty over talent. And this comes into play with, again, that compassion component of this person is really easy to get along with. They're super nice. The leader can trust them to just fall in line and do whatever the current leader asks them to do. Whereas often talent has firmer boundaries and standards, and they don't mind saying no to the leader often. And, when you think about this concept, like that current leader isn't, destroying everything or the organization from the inside out. Like it's really going to diminish the way things work. And it's not because they are bad employees or they have bad processes or maybe they have bad strategy. There might be some bad strategy within this. But promoting people who aren't necessarily willing to take a leadership role and have both the components of compassion and accountability is going to cause disharmony in one side or the other. And I mean, I feel like we see this over and over. Certainly in my organization, I see it often where weak leaders will promote the people that make them feel safe instead of people who make the organization stronger and support the mission. I think oftentimes people really believe that you can only have one or the other. You can only have that compassion, easy to get along with aspect, or you can only have that highly accountable, highly motivated, highly driven, like really kind of has no problem saying what they think when they think it, and really putting out those opinions that are certainly different, possibly, than what the current leadership or organization believes in. They don't just fall in line. And often that scares leaders who are not secure within themselves of having a balance between both that compassion and that accountability. Both are important. That you don't want to do the other side of that, right? Where you just promote your high achiever, your overperformer that's also a complete asshole to deal with on the daily, right? Like that's the other side of that polarity swing. You don't necessarily want to promote those individuals either. But one of the fastest way to identify an insecure leader is to look at who they promote. Strong leaders tend to promote capability and weak leaders tend to promote comfort. Strong leaders want people around them who challenge thinking, elevate standards, solve problems, and bring different perspectives, and will tell them they're wrong when that individual believes that what they're doing is incorrect. Weak leaders, they really just want agreement, and they certainly do not want you saying anything in the public eye that would be different than what they want. They want loyalty, predictability, compliance, and people who won't make them uncomfortable, who won't outshine them, and who definitely won't question them. And, while we're questioning them, they also do not want their blind spots to be exposed. And that's where I believe that organizations begin dying, not dramatically, but slowly, quietly, and it's one promotion at a time until you have 5 million people sitting in leadership roles that don't take initiative, won't say no, and can't drive something forward to completion either. And this all happens because insecure leaders often don't promote the strongest person in the room. They just want to promote the person who's going to tell them yes, the person who is going to agree and who never challenges organizational decisions or thought processes. They want somebody who's going to protect their ego and who will make them feel intelligent and who doesn't create tension in the environment. They want to know that that person is going to do what they're told to do every single time. And meanwhile, those high performers who also have a high capacity for compassion, the innovative ones, the critical thinkers, the problem solvers, the people creating disproportionate value, the people asking those hard questions, the people willing to challenge assumptions, and the people who are willing to tell the truth in meetings, even when it is not the popular opinion. They're all watching and they're learning because every promotion sends a message, and it may not be the message that leadership thinks they're sending. It might actually be the message that employees are going to receive, and that message could become performance doesn't actually matter. Thinking doesn't matter. Results don't matter. Truth doesn't matter. What matters is keeping leadership comfortable. And once employees learn that lesson, the culture starts to change immediately. I mean, why challenge a bad idea or bring forward concerns if it's going to stop me from being promoted, right? Like, why take the risk unless you're an Enneagram 7 who is entertained by the risk and will still continue to do that. And I feel like there's threes that will do it in the background as well. Um, but you're going to see your organization completely change and you will see a lack of innovation. The organization realistically just taught them that advancement comes through politics, right? Not performance. It doesn't actually matter how you perform, it's how you play the political game. And will you just say yes to everything? And I feel like the irony in this is that the same leader who promoted the yes person because they wanted less tension eventually creates an organization where nobody tells them the truth. And then they're upset. Why are all of these people that are in leadership roles not performing? Why are we missing delivery dates? Why can't they do their job? Why can't they? Why can't they? Why can't they? Why can't they? Well, they're not doing anything different than they did before. And you also see the lack of accountability in that previous leader by looking at their decisions of why they promoted and having that hard look in the mirror to say, what did my ego need in these promotions? You know, a one-off promotion where this happens, probably not a pattern. But when you have an entire organization of leaders or an organization where arguably only five people can pick up the hard tasks and deliver the things that are really, really difficult, you've probably created a pattern. And looking at that ego mirror to figure out why or what the ego needed in those moments to promote those individuals is going to be key. But also, now what do you do? Do you fire everyone in those leadership positions that can't deliver or can't make decisions? Or do you try to balance the scales of that universal law of polarity and say, hey, you know what? You guys have really great compassion. We got to work on accountability though. So let's take a look at how we can work on accountability together because if you lack it in my team, I lack it in my leadership as well. So where as a leader am I actually lacking that accountability scale and leaning too far into compassion? Or if you're the flip side of it, where are you leaning too far into being outcome mission driven? And where are you lacking the compassion aspects? That these are all humans that you're working with. And really looking at those scales of what's going on, because I have a feeling that often, and probably in this scenario, Janessa and I will fall on different sides of an imbalanced scale if we are imbalanced. To where I for sure do not give a shit about the compassion aspect often. Like that is something that I have to pay attention to when I'm in a triggered state of, you know, the accountability and the outcome of just getting the result is not more important than the human aspect or the compassion aspect of, I don't want this person to have a bad day while we have this conversation, but we do have to have an accountability conversation if we're missing deadlines. And what I have found is that if you pay attention to both, the amount of times that you have to have these hard conversations gets less and less and less. But that universal law of polarity is true for both sides of that scale. You can't just sit on one side of that scale of all compassion and no boundaries or all accountability and Alcatraz of lack of human connection and an overarching thing that we would call boundaries. Like I have professional boundaries, but realistically, you're disconnecting from the human aspect of the people that you work with, the people that you lead. And both of those are going to become a huge epidemic problem within your organization, especially if the leaders keep promoting the same individuals so that they all have the same lens, the same mirror, which means you're going to have a more difficult time if you promote people who are the same, have the same strengths and the same weaknesses because it's hard to see the other side and it's hard to compensate with the other skill sets if what you're doing is promoting out of comfortability.
So I was chuckling during this part of the conversation as you're talking about comfort, as perhaps I work with someone who has been coined the lazy boy because they're so laid back, they're very reclined. And so it's interesting to see that the comfort they lean into is how quickly can we get things to go away and how quietly can we get them to go away because we're just really leaned back. And I'm curious of your opinion on the and both approach with
Mhm.
this because really promotion is either or. You can't choose multiple people for one single position.
Yep.
So there is a decision that has to be made, and it's very black and white, exactly what our brain likes. It's super efficient, it's clearly defined. But where I have witnessed so many times and coached and led women who are the high achievers that kind of get the short end of the stick is that the end both approach is promoting that yes person, as you've called them, but then allowing still for that high achiever who was overlooked for the promotion continue to be the high achiever and have larger projects assigned to them and larger tasks assigned to them, and they have more things to manage or produce than their colleagues do. And so while usually our conversation around the and both approach is in really clean energy, I think it's also important to point out where it can also be manipulated a little bit and used in a way that isn't actually supportive of the whole entire workplace, the collective, or everyone involved. What do you see with that?
Well, I think there's a couple of different avenues to look at this, right? Like when you are promoting something, when we talk and both, hopefully you can promote somebody that has both compassion and the actual high achievement skills. Like you want your talent that is also emotionally intelligent. That would be the ideal. Now, if that's not available when you're looking for your promotions, then I think you have to look at your organization and say, which one do I need? Which one do I need more of in leadership? To where you have to decide. Maybe it is the yes person because you need a little bit more calm and ease because you have an overarching amount of leaders that are sitting in that outcome based focused and less compassion. Or maybe the flip side is true. I think that when it comes to seeing organizations manipulate statistics, output, whatever, by not promoting the high achiever because they need them to still be delivering the projects rather than leading a team, I think that organization is going to cripple themselves eventually. Because what they are overlooking in the and both approach is that if you promote the high achiever who also has the emotional intelligence to be able to be in leadership, because that's important, right? Output and being able to deliver on projects does not actually mean that you're going to be a good leader. Like there's very different skill sets required, in my opinion, from a high achiever that can deliver projects and a high achiever who can lead an actual team and develop it. Because your focus has to shift from delivering the project to delivering what the team needs for them to be able to deliver on the projects, giving them the tools that they need to be successful, the trainings, the mentoring, the whatever. So your field of focus has to shift. But do I think that often organizations are very manipulative with that of keeping the high achievers in the delivery role rather than promoting them? Absolutely. And I think what you see then is resentment. That high achiever is not going to stay for forever. If they don't start seeing the promotions or the dividends of income increases or rewards or more flexibility within the workspace, they're not going to stay because a high achiever can find another job, especially if it's your high achiever that you always rely on to be the face of and deliver the items. There's other people who see them. They will go somewhere else eventually. And then what you're left with is no high achiever and a leader who not only didn't do a good job of keeping the high achiever engaged, but also doesn't actually know how to deliver like the high achiever did. That's going to be a larger problem. So I think organizations are often faced with a decision. Do you have the faith in your high achiever that is emotionally intelligent to be able to build more of themselves? Can they make more of themselves? If that answer is yes, then they're crazy to not promote those individuals. If you have a high achiever that you truly believe lacks emotional intelligence to be able to build and lead a team, then what is the organization doing to actually deliver and produce options for that high achiever to gain new skill sets to move into a leadership role? Because you want them to amplify and create more of their delivery and high achieving aspects. So give them the tools that you believe they're lacking. If they are lacking, and if they're not lacking, stop being so damn afraid of everything and make a decision that might feel a little bit risky because will that high achiever tell you no in public? Probably. They probably won't just fall in line and do as they're told every single time. Why do you want that though, versus somebody who will call out a risk that maybe you didn't see? Because we all have blind spots. We're all going to miss things. And often your high achievers are the ones who can see the things that are culturally wrong within the organization, or they will question the aspects of why am I doing it? You can't just tell me to go do something because that's how we've always done it. What does it actually do? Like, what is this thing providing? And if you can't answer me of like what benefit this thing is providing, your high achievers are probably not going to do that. But why would you want them to continue doing something that is likely inefficient and also provides no value?
Yeah, I think this conversation's a little bit more nuanced when we're talking about high achievers, although we may be saying the same thing and just putting different words on it. Because when they are making that shift from being in a position of high achieving to more of leading or managing, I used to know the stats on this of how many people believe or their supervisor believe they failed. It's like within the first 4 months or something. It's really quick
Yeah.
because there's a shift where you have to start delegating. And so sometimes promoting the high achiever might not be the exact best situation for the team, especially if they're going to micromanage or not relinquish. And then that
Yep.
piggybacks exactly into what you're saying about you have the skills and the resources to shift that perspective and focus of how they are delivering, what it is they deliver as a leader that is very different from the previous role. And those things certainly will hinge upon someone's success. I think it really is so important to find the person who is willing to find the resources they need because I have yet to encounter a leader who has adequately resourced me in most challenging situations where the stakes are really high. And that is, each of us know what we need the most. And so that's just my 2 cents on this with hiring. I love hiring. I love to develop people. And I have found that that is the greatest asset for sure is how resourceful is the person and how malleable are they, where they're not stuck in this rigid either or trap of thinking, but inflexible mindset, however you want to label it or think about it. Um, and that is there's just so many different angles to talk about this and both paradigm from, but we'll leave it at that for now.
Yeah, I think when you look at this aspect too, while leadership is really typically focused on the organization and how to get whatever done they have to get done. I think your high achievers are more evaluating of the culture. They're more evaluating of how do I feel while I'm here? What do I think while I'm here? Do I want to actually be in this space? I think your high achievers are the ones who are going to look at their own personal happiness too of do I feel fulfilled here rather than am I just here to fill a spot? Your high achievers know they can go somewhere else. They know that they can get hired somewhere else and do something different. So they're really evaluating certain things like does the organization hold the same level of excellence that I do? And if not, I mean, depends on which Enya type they are, what they'll do with that. So maybe we'll get into that in a next Eyes Wide Open episode. But they're going to start seeing mediocrity getting promoted over capability, and they're going to start looking elsewhere. Because one thing that is difficult too is when, and I would say not even just mediocrity or average, oftentimes what they see are the individuals getting promoted who have delivered less than half of what they're asked to deliver in a month in their entire careers. And then they also can't really show up in that space of forwarding a concept or an idea that is opposite of what the rest of the group wants, to where it's just hard. It's really, I'm speaking from experience here if everybody's curious, but it's really hard to work for somebody that doesn't put as much energy or passion into what they're doing. It's difficult to look around at that and say, is this a one-off? And that's a different scenario versus when they're looking at it and they're like, wow, this is actually pretty much the whole organization, sans about 5 people. That becomes really difficult to decide, like, how much energy do I want to put into this to change the culture and the space that I'm in? Or do I want to start looking elsewhere? And I think this is where that universal law of polarity comes in to where the high achievers can really discern their own empowerment within this too of It can still be an and both approach. You can still be a high achiever and hold that accountability and compassion aspect in where you currently are. And you can also look elsewhere to see what else is out there. So you don't have to diminish your own standards or your own inner truth and authority and principles of what you believe to be true, while also seeking out other opportunities to find one that is a good fit. But I think oftentimes we lean into that resentment aspect to where we'll start to sway our own standards because it's easier to do that than it is to actually try to change the culture or stay standing where they are. And when they start to realize that leadership is more interested in that loyalty rather than their capability, oftentimes I think a lot of people will just shrink and will kind of give up some of those aspects of their own drive because it's not necessarily being rewarded. And then the really shitty thing is that when your output starts to diminish, people start to question, well, why? Why are you slowing down? Like, what's wrong? Like, why aren't you doing the same things that you did before? Why aren't you speaking up in the rooms to make sure that the risks are mitigated? And then those leaders that promote it out of comfort don't necessarily want to hear the truth. They don't want to hear because it's not rewarded, it's not valued. And why am I going to go to a meeting, say what I think is true, get punched in the face, and then watch somebody else get promoted because they never do any of those things because they're just easy, they're simple, they don't take a lot of energy to deal with because they lack, some of that passion that's there. So I think a lot of those things can turn into a really disastrous loop when we don't take a look at that. And this is where I go back to having those conversations about accountability and compassion that can be really difficult for leadership. When you start to see that in your team where the resentment is there or they're not delivering what they were, what do you do with that?
I think this conversation is really interesting if you look at entry level versus
Mm-hmm.
further advanced employees. And I think the conversation evolves as one's own career evolves. So, looking at more entry level positions, I often feel as though the ones who aren't promoted as quickly don't have the skills to say, this is exactly what I've accomplished. This is what I've achieved. This is what sets me apart from other people.
Mm-hmm.
And then further along, which is where I feel like the angle you were speaking about the paradigm from, is once people are at a higher level position, and those things I think all ring very true there. But I think at the more entry level positions, people oftentimes will just be so grateful to be in the organization. And they certainly will have feelings about who is promoted and why. But I also feel like what I have seen is more of their own inability to really set themselves apart at that level to go after the promotion. And they're more in this either or. Like if I have to go after something, I think I'll lean back and be a little bit more passive and not ripple the waters. Now, this too plays out by Enneagram type and is not a blanket comment across the board by any means. Um, but just as you, speaking from experience as well with what I've seen in um, my own personal journey. And I think the efficiency, excellence can be a little bit of a trap for people too. When we focus on high achievers, what would make someone promotable? That they feel like they either have to move quickly and create pressure within themselves, or they have to do really quality work and maybe lean a little bit to the side of perfectionistic work. And they don't feel like they can adequately strive to hit both. And this is an area where no matter where you are in your career, your pace, like having peace with your pace, and knowing that the pace that you are really owning is going to create your excellence will stop the rushing, the scattered execution that can happen, having incomplete work or needing to tidy things up down the road because you went so fast, it was sloppy. And this is something I, of course, have constantly throughout my career dealt with, especially with the trauma that I've dealt with, because my nervous system was programmed for so long to go into that heightened state. We're just going to move. Maybe it's frantic. We don't care. We're getting stuff done if we're moving. And I had to teach myself that really to slow down is when I speed up. And so when I slow down my thinking, just like we talked about in the intro, that's when the wisdom can drop in versus trying to make decisions from that rushed space or trying to execute at a high level while being rushed. It just doesn't land. And so we really don't have to separate out efficiency versus excellence either. We're able to execute both. It's just we have to be mindful in doing it and not let our nervous system override the situation and let that pressure take over. Just take some deep breaths, slow down, and know that your pace is the right pace for the situation. And when you do that consistently, then when you're in the high stakes situations, when you're in the meetings where you might get punched in the face, so to speak, in the other situations where you notice the internal wiring of yourself, your nervous system is starting to flare, you have that practice to bring yourself back and to slow down, to not being reactive in that moment. So building in some of these tangible skills for any of the either or dynamics that pop up, it all comes back to our inner discipline, knowing our inner terrain, knowing how to slow our bodies and our minds down. No matter what situation that you're in, that is when you really will perform at a higher level of excellence versus letting the cortisol take over and the adrenaline rush take over and just pushing through any situation.
Yeah, I would just challenge a little bit that even in those entry level positions, I think a high achiever is always a high achiever, no matter where they're starting at. I do think that it can look a little bit different in the like goal setting of it. Like I can remember when I started entry level position start that I did as well. I just wanted to be a level two, right? I just wanted to be a level two employee. I was going to do that for forever time, and that was what I was going to do. But I think that high achievers are always going to look for opportunities to excel. And I think high achievers are naturally competitive. I think they're competitive with others, but I think more importantly, they're competitive with themselves too. I think there is a lot of aspects of that of I want to do the best that I can because my what for whatever the motivator is, whether it is perfection is the motivator, being seen is the motivator, or being able to do what you want when you want to do it. So if you perform really good and you have good stats, that's usually nobody usually comes and knocks at your door asking you what you're doing, right? But whatever that motivator is, I do think that a high achiever is still going to try to achieve no matter where they're at within an organization. I just think it looks different. And one thing that I notice when the leadership of those teams are also a high achiever, those specific leaders will provide opportunities to others or try to guide them, mentor them, get them to move. But a high achiever, even under a leadership individual that is likely or not a high achiever or is more laid back or is towards the end of their career, are going to find ways to still excel in their job. They're going to find resources. They're going to try to equip themselves to still be successful. So, I mean, I will say, like, I do judge a book by a cover a little bit, no matter where they're at within an organization, of what are they doing to equip themselves? What are they trying to move forward with? What are their goals, right? Maybe their goals don't seem lofty in the moment, but are they striving to do the best that they can or to add value in every single room that they step in? I just don't think high achievers don't do that. I think they walk into a room and try to do the best that they can, or they try to add value within that room, regardless of where they're at in their career.
Oh, for sure. I was just thinking before, it doesn't always lead to promotion.
Agreed. That is true. Promotion is not necessarily a part of it that leads to that. And I also don't think that promotion is always the thing that the high achiever is going for. I think they also look for other aspects too, right? Like they're looking for community connection. Maybe they just want to be recognized within the organization. They want to have that community aspect. Like it looks different for each one. Like what is their reward, so to speak? Like, what does their neurology seek out for that? Now, some high achievers, absolutely, the promotion is 100% what they want. And sometimes they want the promotion because they want the pay increase, but not the responsibility of being a leader. And I think that is where the universal law of polarity comes in as well, to where if that is what the high achiever's goal is just a pay increase, they might not actually have the other aspects of that coin to be a really good leader. So promoting that high achiever just because they want the money aspect would also not be the right decision to make, likely for your organization. So there's no easy one size fits all to where you should always pick the high achiever for your promotions. Not necessarily, right? Like you definitely want to look for the unicorn where you have a high achiever that also has high emotional intelligence as well as a high capacity to be able to handle stressful situations and deal with people in a manner that makes those people want to come back the next day. But unicorns don't exist everywhere. So sometimes we do have to make strategic decisions as leaders too of what do we need to do? What does the organization need? What does this specific team need? Do they need a more compassionate leader that will kind of, lean into the more human aspects, or do they need somebody that's going to push them to drive forward in the accountability of the delivery aspects? It just depends on the organization, the project, and the team that they're being asked to lead. Because while a leader could be a great fit for one specific team, they might be the worst fit for an entirely different team as well. It's the harmony of the entire layout of what you're looking for.
I think one blind spot I've had so far in this radio show with leaders is not giving due credit to our leaders who don't want to promote but are high achievers. And their leadership is in a different way because they are the ones holding the stand for the other people on the team.
Mhm.
Like they're performing at such an excellent level and they're not going anywhere. And they're holding those other people on the team to rise to the occasion. And so as you were talking, I was thinking through this and I'm like, I don't think I've ever talked about leadership from that context before. And it's so important. Like it really is important to have the high achievers who really like the position that they're in, such as you initially said, like you thought you'd just stay there for forever. Because they really are, even if they're silent leaders, even if they're not the ones verbally, challenging, and I mean that in a very playful way. I don't mean that in a competitive way, but challenging their coworkers to do better,
Mhm.
knowing where the metrics and things are. I don't know, my team is really competitive, so they share that information and talk about it all the time. So it's just a naturally occurring situation in the dynamic of who's doing what, and they all push each other to do their best. And I love that about my leaders who they don't want to be called a leader actually even at all. They are that Enneagram 9, Enneagram 6, like they want to be on that level playing field with peers. But at the end of the day, the truth of the matter is they absolutely are leading. It's just in a very different way than the style of leadership we typically talk about here on the show.
I so agree. And those individuals definitely get overlooked, I think, when we're in a leadership topic because they're so abhorrent to even the phrase being there, except they are the person that the team leans on. It's the individual that the team is going to go to when they have questions or concepts to where I think it's so interesting that those people, not that they want to stay in that position, but that they don't see themselves like the rest of the organization sees them of being that silent leader. Like you don't have the title, but you have the influence. And the influence is far more instrumental in success than an actual title or that promotion can be. Because if you can influence people to do better, to do the right thing, to do something that's going to push the mission forward, that's far more of a skill set and a talent than you have the title of the chief. So therefore, people have to do as you say because of the title. You're going to get so much more out of people when you can lean into the influence aspect rather than that micromanaging, well, you have to do it because I told you to do it and because I hold the title, to where you can have more of that two-sided conversation, that back and forth, the equal and opposite energy exchange, where they trust you, right? I feel like people who are influential are also trusted because of the results that they give, but also the emotional safety that they provide to people to be honest with them as well. So they can sway decisions because of their reputation, because of their work ethic, because of who they are, and not the title that they were promoted to.
So if you're game, I'd love to explore just a couple examples of things that are so regularly experienced in the workplace and highlight the dichotomy of the law of polarity, the either or approach. So let's start with our favorite, the difficult employee. And typically, with the difficult employee, it is default for leaders to think that we should just fire them and get rid of them and be done with it, or we have to keep tolerating the behavior. And it can be hard to find that middle ground because actually, most times, neither one of those will be the answer. I mean, depending upon what happened on a first offense, firing them probably isn't going to be the path taken, although when appropriate, it is part of the situation. But really, the question to ask yourself to find that middle ground is how do I support the person while refusing to enable them? So while also addressing the behavior, how can we create better support for a different outcome? And this is really the polarity dynamic that we're talking about is finding that gray. And as you can quickly see, the level of critical thinking that it takes to find that gray level in that situation, it depends on the employee. It depends on what resources and support is available. Like there's so much to consider in finding that gray area of what is in between the either or polarized options. Another example is organizational change. I haven't had much of this in anybody's workplace since 2020 and COVID, so no one's going to relate to this at all. But most leaders will step into one of two roles, which will be primarily wanting to either protect their employees and people from the discomfort, or let's just push change at all costs because if we can just get through to the other side, it's going to be better. These changes are going to bring about a lot of positive effects. So let's just get there. But the really mature leader is going to step back and pause and not rush and reflect on how can I honor the emotional impact of change and still move the changes forward at the same time. So it's really blending them together versus just choosing one dynamic or the other. The last one that I also feel like is pretty relevant to leaders, especially new leaders, unless you're maybe SJ. I'm just kidding. But
This
is
is
being
going with
liked.
the flow one.
No, no, but that would be a good one too. A really good guess. Being liked versus being respected. And this is where I feel like SJ just really holds the line of being respectful, even with being so clear and so um bold. To me, it's bold. To her, it's just like another day in the office. But this is the polarization between the two of us. So it's so natural, especially for women, to unconsciously, like you might not even consciously connect that this is happening until you sit with yourself a little bit and find that maybe you have a limiting belief or an underlying belief that if people like me, then I'm leading well versus that, like the best leadership really can create temporary discomfort, and leadership is not always popular either, but leadership is also stewardship. So, on the other side of the polarization that I failed to articulate, the first side, if people like me, then I'm leading well, like your likability somehow gauges your success as a leader, which is not the way that you're going to want to measure it, especially if you want to be an impactful leader. That's also not to say you need to be an asshole like SJ said earlier in the show. On the other side of that is if people dislike me, I'm leading poorly. And that's not necessarily true either. And rarely does leadership ever need to be personal. And if someone's making it personal, they've really misunderstood the assignment, and that's their issue to work through and not yours.
Mhm.
And so you just really stay focused on the mission, your position, what is being asked of you to do, and this whole likability conversation doesn't need to enter. Are you respecting the people you work with? Are they respecting you? We're professionals, and that's really where from. So those were my examples that I thought people might easily see the polarization dynamics with. As we move toward the top of the hour, SJ, what else do you want to share before we move into wrapping it up?
No, I mean, I think we've really covered quite a bit of ground within this too, but I just think that the self-awareness is so important for everybody. Whether you're looking to be promoted or whether you're already in a leadership role, what are you actually looking at from a value system and where are your decision-making faculties coming from? Like what is helping you decide? And one of the things that I think can often happen is going into hiring, people already know who they want. And I would just challenge those individuals to really get clear for why they have already made that decision. Why are they choosing that individual without ever seeing the other people? For who they are that may be applying for that because there could be individuals applying that you had no idea that would even be there. So still having that internal discernment to look at what am I hiring for and who's going to best forward this position and this specific team that we're hiring for. Because while someone may be a great fit on one team as a leader, they may be a really poor fit for a separate team because of the human dynamics that are at play. So having both aspects of that universal law of polarity of the compassion and the human aspect and the accountability and the delivery aspects is so important as leaders as we're making decisions about new leaders or about new team setups and items like that as well.
Absolutely. All right. Well, to summarize, today we looked at the leadership trap that a lot of intelligent, capable women fall into and believing that we always have, and it's one or the other. But leadership isn't actually the art of choosing one city. It's the art of holding the tension long enough to discover the wisdom that exists between them. And we didn't get into tension as deeply as I thought we might today with all of the topics that we did cover, but we talked about it last week in Stronger Together, and we will talk about it more this week as well within our community. And it's a topic we visited in the past as well. It's a really important art to be able to execute, no matter if you're leading in the workplace, leading a family, leading in any capacity. Part of our growth, I mean, even the muscle requires tension to build strength. So when we can't tolerate that tension, that's when we react. We'll rush the decisions, we'll over-explain, we'll micromanage, all of these great things that nobody really enjoys experiencing from leadership. So our invitation today is pretty simple, and it is that the next time that you find yourself asking which option is right or wrong, to stop long enough and ask yourself, what truth does each side hold? And maybe find what is the solution if you blended the two polar opposites together, like we saw as we walk through a few of those examples. And this questioning process alone can really change the quality of your leadership, your relationships, and for sure the decisions that you make every day. And if you didn't already pick up on it, this is exactly why Stronger Together exists. But what I really love the most is that what makes our community different is that we don't teach one right way to live, to lead, to grow, or to heal. And as you often experience here, even on the radio show, SJ and I really tend to be living examples of the law of polarity because we approach life and leadership and spirituality and growth and just about everything from very different angles. And that's precisely the gift. Because our members get to witness two very powerful expressions of truth instead of being handed another formula or cookie cutter strategy to follow. So, inside Stronger Together, you develop the discernment to recognize what is authentically yours and also be able to see what you've adopted clearly from conditioning or pressure or expectation. And you stop trying to become someone else and you start becoming fully yourself and being comfortable while you're doing it. Perhaps most importantly, we help you identify that keep creating the same outcomes that you don't want, the same frustrations that you'd rather not experience, and the same forms of stagnation, so that you finally interrupt the loop instead of endlessly analyzing it. Because transformation does not happen when you collect more information. It happens when you see clearly enough so that you can choose differently. And if you're ready for that level of growth, we'd love to welcome you into the Stronger Together community. The conversation is powerful, the community is extraordinary, and the women you're becoming is worth the investment. You can grab your seat or learn more at www.strongertogetherinstitute.com. And we will see you again in 2 weeks. Until then, keep your eyes wide open.